back, nerds. Today we get into the vast mythology of Thor's rogue gallery. 10. Brother Toad. Brother Toad is the king of the deviants and fought Thor when the Thunder God happened to be working with the Eternals. Brother Toad has no powers, just kind of the regular deviant physiology. He did have an oversized head though, which made it hard. 9. Tuckots. Bloodthirsty and speaks in rhyme. What more could you want from a villain? He first appeared in New York, which meant not only did he fight Thor, but also Spider-Man. Whatever he touches rots, like cars, buildings, nothing and no one is safe. He can also make copies of himself and fly, but thankfully he does have a weakness when it comes to sound frequencies, because otherwise, no weakness, yeah, just pack that up. 8. Hiram. Hiram pilots a death ship made of finger and toenails. Truly, that ship is the last place I would ever want to be, but it isn't the most interesting thing about him. He's a giant. When Asgard was in turmoil thanks to Ragnarok, Hiram was one of the many that attacked it. He also managed to land a damaging blow to Thor's hammer, but was able to be taken out by Iron Man, which kind of feels a little bit like plot armor, as much as I do love Tony Stark. 7. Jared Carstairs, inventor, weatherman, stalker. 3 things that typically should not go together. Due to the stalking, Jared was fired as the local weatherman. He couldn't handle not having the weather in his life though, so he became Weathermaker. He invented a suit that could create weather, like rain, tornadoes, lightning, and hail. He was a danger for everyone. Thor destroyed the Weathermaker's power pack, stripping the villain of his powers, leading to his arrest. 6. Crusader. Arthur Blackwood was deeply religious, to the point where he believed that if you weren't religious or didn't believe in his god, you either needed to start believing or be gone. He saw Thor as blasphemous because, well, he calls himself the Thunder God, right? Which shouldn't be possible if you believe there is only one true god. Arthur gained impressive powers from the spirits of his ancestors, turning him into the Crusader, with the goals of all the Crusaders that came before him. He was so powerful, he was able to hold his own against Thor and even seriously injured the Norse god. However, when Thor popped back up again, good as new, the villain began to doubt his abilities and Thor shattered his sword. 5. Durok. This villain was created specifically to fight Thor, and you'll never guess who commissioned them. Loki. Quite literally, he wanted the villain to destroy Thor, and that is it. The Silver Surfer was also involved in the fight. Durok bent his surfboard, and the only way to defeat him was by taking him to the future right before the big crunch happens. So this implies that the villain is unbeatable by modern standards, and only the collapse of the universe could handle the job. 4. Thermal Man. A robot originally designed to be a super worker in factories and industries. The robot designs were stolen by the government and reprogrammed to destroy America. The robot was tested by getting shipped off to the US. Obviously, he lands in New York first and pretty quickly makes a mess of it all. By the time Thor gets there, it's a disaster. Most of the city has been evacuated. In the end, the country that sent it realized how bad they messed up, so they sent an experimental explosive to take care of that robot. It was less of a good faith gesture and more because they realized that this was basically a declaration of war. In the end, despite Thor's best efforts, all that really worked was subduing the robot and freezing him. 3. Doughboy. He's not a real boy, he's a blob that looks like dough, or, well, Jabba the Hutt. He was created by Zola to be a servant and has worked with the villain his entire life. Doughboy's claim to fame, other than his distinct appearance, is his shapeshifting abilities. Of course, if you're modeled after dough, you would hope that they can shapeshift. 2. Millennius. He has only popped up once to fight both Thor and the Silver Surfer. He was imprisoned by Odin and another dimension years ago because he tried to destroy all life everywhere on Earth. I do think that that warrants a lockup. He was not only powerful enough to, well, try that, but also to fight Thor and the Silver Surfer at once and give them a hard time. 1. Jack the Ripper, the Parasite. You ever see something that just makes you sick of Marvel? Because that is what Jack the Ripper, the Parasite is for me. So, infamous Jack wasn't actually a person in the Marvel Universe, but a parasite sent from the Dark Dimension by Dormammu that would take root in a host and then encourage them to commit terrible crimes and act as sort of an earthly host for the demon. Because the first set of atrocities he committed gave him the name Jack the Ripper, every host from that point forward took up that mantle, kind of. Then years down the road, Jack possesses an actor, Ben Wolf, working on a slasher project. Ben is involved in a nuclear explosion because of course he is, and now he has the ability to produce knives out of energy. Driven mad by the parasite, Wolf begins to act out his script in real life, taking someone close to Thor and attempting to eliminate an entire women's shelter. Thankfully, he was stopped by Thor, but what a wild ride.
Number 10. Black Widow. Sorry, Black Widow, but there isn't any way you are making it out of a fight with Gorr alive. He's had billions of years of experience when it comes to destroying and defeating gods, and I don't think your spy skills are going to save you in this battle. I'm sorry, Black Widow, I love you, but it's just not gonna cut it. Also, if we're talking MCU Black Widow, I mean, that'd be a really easy fight because she's dead, so yeah. The best shot that Black Widow might have in terms of comic book Black Widow obviously, is to distract Gorr and get him monologuing, to bide her some time to put a miraculous tactical plan into action. But even then, I do not think it would be enough. Gorr has thousands of years of combat experience, which means that whatever Black Widow threw at him, he likely could just push through, and even if initially he wasn't victorious, eventually he would be. Number 9. Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is a member of the Eternals. In the Eternals film, he was one of my favorite characters personally, played by the amazing Don Lee. Unfortunately, in that film, he was killed by the Deviants. Gilgamesh joined the Avengers in the comics back in the 1980s. Originally, he was known as the Forgotten One, but he would take up the name of Gilgamesh during his time on the superhero team. Normally, Eternals aren't so easy to kill, because when they die, they can come right back. And instead of being brought back as like android-like synthetic beings that are created by the Celestials, like in the movie, they were once humans who were simply altered by the Celestials to be a superpowered immortal race in the comics. They can be resurrected instead by a giant system known as the Machine that is integrated with Earth. But needless to say, Gilgamesh's superior strength, fighting skills, and immortality would still not be enough to stop Gorr. He was used to defeating godlike beings such as Gilgamesh every day, all the time. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to show our channel some love on another platform, head on over to Facebook and give us a like, give us a follow, do all the Facebook stuff. Number 8. Quicksilver. Quicksilver is known for being one of the fastest superheroes in Marvel Comics. If we use the term speedster at Marvel, which I don't think we do, we know him as one of the greatest ones within that universe. One of the greatest speedsters. More of a DC thing. Quicksilver, like his sister Scarlet Witch, ended up joining the Avengers, leaving the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants and Magneto, who Wanda felt they were basically indebted to. Like Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver became a hero while working on the Avengers team. And you might think his speed would be enough to keep him safe from Gorr, but something you'd be forgetting is how relentless Gorr the God Butcher is, and how he can pretty much make almost infinite copies of himself, each made from a part of himself as he's bonded with the All Black, so he can just basically like pop up other versions of him all over the place. I've seen what happens when Quicksilver gets mauled in his own series and Avengers tie-in, Quicksilver No Surrender, and let me tell you, he doesn't fare too well. While Quicksilver can run away, he can't run forever as he does get tired and needs to rest, even with his superhuman stamina and speed. And this, I imagine, would ultimately be his undoing if Gorr didn't kill him before that. Number 7. Vision. Vision, being an all-powerful android, alas, would not protect him from the reach of Gorr the God Butcher. I doubt Vision or his maker in the comics, Ultron, would be able to stand against Gorr, even if they were joined up together. While Vision might be smart, Gorr just has way more experience when it comes to defeating those that stand against him. And while it's never explicitly stated, I don't think, that Gorr has defeated any gods of technology that either represented that concept or were in fact made of technology, it is implied that he's defeated gods of all kinds in the comics, which would likely include technological gods. I wouldn't be surprised to learn that Gorr had taken on Phalanx, who ruled over the Technarchy, or the Phalanx's creators themselves, Titans, which were basically AI societies that evolved into a singularity, who he could easily see as tech-based gods. And if he could down a Titan, he could certainly down Vision. If Ant-Man were small, Gorr would squish him like a bug. If he were big, he would just rip out his giant heart. The reality is that Gorr has taken on bigger beings than Ant-Man. At one point, he downed an Elder God, smugly brandishing its heart in victory. What's worse is that Gorr is also somewhat of an inventor and kind of, in a way, a scientist like Hank Pym was. And he's definitely capable of thievery like Scott Lang once was. Although Gorr usually prefers to kill those he generally steals from, as many of them are gods, so his version of stealing is more like murder and then steal the thing. Gorr actually uses the heart of the Elder God he defeats for a deadly and evil project that he's working on, a god bomb intended to destroy all the gods, ending their reign over the cosmos once and for all. Number 5. Cersei. Cersei is a member of the Eternals, but for a while she actually ran with the Avengers herself. She is known for being a good friend of Iron Man, and she went on a few adventures with the Avengers team, even joining them for a time and becoming the romantic partner of another Avenger member, Black Knight. Circe was also a member of the team known as the God Squad as well, and technically as an Eternal, she's pretty much on a god tier level. Eternals are immortal beings who are simply resurrected after they die and have lived for millennia. As such, they are known throughout history as beings of myth and lore. Circe herself was once known as Circe the Sorceress because of her abilities to see into others' minds, cast illusions, and manipulate matter. However, not even this would protect her against Gorr. Like Gilgamesh, the Eternal mentioned before her, Gorr would not only end both of them, but he would likely also destroy the planet simply to prevent them from being resurrected by the machine, the powerful system that brings the Eternals back after they die, and like I said, is heavily integrated into the planet. Number 4. Scarlet Witch. Wanda might be one of the most powerful heroes on the Avengers, at least when it comes to magic, but she is also, pretty squishy. She was killed at one point by Rogue, wielding bone claws, and so I don't think Gorr would have too difficult of a time disposing of her, sadly. Sorry, Wanda. Granted, if we're talking MCU Wanda, then he shouldn't struggle really at all. She is possibly gone forever, or will be at the very least MIA for a while after the events of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. In the comics though, Wanda is a powerful reality warper and chaos magic wielder, but if Gorr managed to surprise her, he could easily eliminate the Scarlet Witch. Number 3. Spider-Man. I really don't want to imagine Spider-Man falling to Gorr in the MCU, especially after we just lost Spider-Man to Thanos and then got him back and everything that happened in No Way Home, but it is very possible. The all-black necro sword that Gorr fights with is known for being one of the best and most badass weapons in all of the cosmos. It comes from the same place as Venom comes from, the planet Clintar, and it is actually the first symbiote that was ever forged by Null, the god of the symbiotes, who at one point ruled that world and who Gorr first stumbled upon when he first learned that gods truly do exist. He merged with the all-black, which is what gives him his power. Being that this is the oldest symbiote in existence, which allows Gorr to create multiple copies of himself at will, and also grants him super strength, shapeshifting abilities, and the power to heal, it's easy to see how Spider-Man, who in the past has struggled against Venom and Carnage in the comics, would be easily defeated. Number 2. Ares. Ares is the god of war, so I think you see where I'm going with this. God. Ares ended up on the Dark Avengers team and was also part of the Mighty Avengers, the initiative. While he might not be on the main roster of Avengers, he seemed like an important one to mention given the fact that, you know, he's an actual god. How do we know that Gorr can beat him? Because, well, Gorr has already defeated a ton of gods, including those that symbolize or represent war, which means that he's already got experience taking down others like Ares, so what's to stop him from defeating this god of war from the Greek pantheon? I'm pretty sure Gorr is also going to destroy Zeus in Thor Love and Thunder, and it's possible that the other gods of the Greek pantheon, Ares included, will also get decimated by Gorr and the All Black. Number 1. Thor. I know this might be a weird one to have on the list, especially considering that Thor did beat Gorr in the comics, and multiple times too, but hear me out. Typically when Thor has beaten Gorr, it's because he is power boosted or because he has some kind of help. The first time around he had the help of other Thors out of time, as well as the help of Gorr in a way in the form of Agar, his son that he had lost, which he kind of recreated with the All Black, but which really seemed to represent Gorr's own self-loathing at what he had become in a way, an even more cruel god. Aside from that, Thor also had the help of the remaining gods of the universe out there, whose belief in him gave him added strength in his fight against Gorr. So if we had just one Thor versus one Gorr, I'm not sure he would have been so successful. One Thor does not equal one Gorr.
Number 10, we've got President Loki. Loki has always been known as a trickster, using his deception and social manipulation to get what he wants. So I'm placing President Loki in this list because this version of the trickster is at peak performance when it comes to what he does best. In Vote Loki Volume 1, this Loki is running for president. The issue was released in 2016, giving it another dimension of context that we can all understand, telling the story of a bad dude who had become famous. For others, other things before trying a term in the Oval Office. But in the Disney Plus story, he appears as a variant of Loki that had been pruned and placed into the void along with the other unwanted Lokis, and this Loki uses his powerful influence to build an army of rejects and pose a pretty serious threat to the heroes of the story. His only downfall is due to the fact that the people he's trying to lead are other Lokis. And remember what almost all Lokis seem to want somewhere deep down inside? Yeah, their own powers. So yes, there's a revolt, and Alligator Loki, one of my favorite Lokis, bites off President Loki's arm. The idea of a Loki running for president is terrifying and more powerful than people might give it credit for. Remember, power doesn't always mean brute force. I mean, haven't we learned anything from Loki's approach time and time again? At number 9, we have Loki from Earth 12591. And if you know your reality codes, you'll know I'm talking about the Loki that has to face off against an onslaught of zombies. Now, this version of Loki isn't glaringly more powerful than the rest, but his power comes from his final act of protecting the rest of the survivors from a zombie Thor. It isn't typical for Loki to actually contend with his brother in hand-to-hand combat, especially when his brother is under the influence of a plague that inflicts aggression and possibly even more super strength. But he does, and in this struggle, he almost wins. Unfortunately though, Thor is backed up by the other zombies and tears Loki to pieces. But he goes out with glory, saving the lives of a few in the process, and also sort of abandoning a few as well, in classic Loki fashion. He had just previously left a few others to die as something of a distraction while he escaped, but his final confrontation shows Loki putting up an impressive fight given the circumstances and wielding his flaming sword Leviathan. At number 8, we have Inverted Loki from the Axis storyline. In this storyline, Loki, along with other villains and heroes alike, are hit with an inversion spell. This causes everyone's personalities to shift into opposites of what they normally are. And what this does to, or should I say what this does for Loki, is actually makes him worthy of wielding Thor's hammer. In the context of Loki, Mjolnir is like a symbol for his eternal inadequacy to Thor and Odin. As long as he couldn't wield it, he would never get the respect he thought he deserved from his adopted family. But when this changes, it makes Loki infinitely more powerful than he ever could have been otherwise. Not only can he use the hammer, but his insecurities seem to vanish and his personality changes to be, well, heroic. In Journey into Mystery, Fear itself, this storyline is further explored, because who doesn't want to know what Loki could achieve with his adept wit and cunning, matched with his newfound confidence and power? The answer would be something like if Thor could also talk himself out of almost anything and trick people into getting exactly what he wants. Very powerful stuff. At number 7, we have Sylvie. This female version of Loki causes such a huge impact on the MCU storyline that she actually splits apart the whole multiverse. She seems to be the most cunning and effective version of Loki without needing to rely on godly powers. She causes a Nexus event when she escapes the TVA and the Timekeepers, posing as one of the most major threats to the sacred timeline that the TVA had ever seen. And as she grows up and hides among different timelines, she plans to exact her revenge on her former captors. When she successfully finds her way to He Who Remains, she, spoiler alert, kills him, not realizing this would cause the multiverse to collapse, giving Kang a boost of power. But this one single Loki variant, Sylvie, uses all her abilities of cunning and wit to her advantage as she blends in throughout the years, making arguably a more significant impact than even the original Loki could ever make. Next on our list at number 6, we have Boastful Loki from the MCU. This version of Loki wields what appears to be Thor's hammer Mjolnir. Well, not quite. It kind of looks more like a wrench with a chunk of girder jammed onto the end of it. But regardless, this version of Loki claims that before he was found out by the TVA and his timeline pruned, he had acquired all of the Infinity Stones. This character is most likely a reference to Loki Odinson from Earth 18897, who in the comics also has the Infinity Stones and wields Mjolnir. And when he comes in contact with the less impressive Loki Laufeyson, he sort of mocks him, saying, "Where are your Infinity Stones? Where is your Mjolnir?" So mean. Also, this superior Loki's last name suggests he's the true son of Odin, also a sword spot for the Loki we know, with the power of the Infinity Stones and his own manipulative capabilities to boot. It's fair to say that he'd have quite the one-up on his original counterpart, who couldn't even lift the hammer, let alone wield all the Infinity Stones, or even get out of his own head. Okay, at number 5 we have King Loki, who appears first in Loki, Agent of Asgard number 1. This version of Loki is working for the All-Mother, completing tasks for her in order for her to erase his past crimes. And each task that he completes successfully for the All-Mother deletes a crime of his from the past. Talk about regret, eh? Yeah. This Loki just seems more supercharged than the Earth 616 version, both in his motivations and his abilities. He also faces off and defeats the Ultron Singularity, the last task on his list of deeds laid out by the All-Mother. He's then freed and supposedly forgiven for his deeds, but when he's continued to be referred to as the God of Lies, he goes back to his old ways once more. After hundreds of years working for the All-Mother, this Loki has had a lot more time practicing his abilities and therefore has gotten a lot better with them, much to the chagrin of Earth, which he destroys in this storyline. And then he tries to attack Thor with an army of the undead. He fails at the latter, but to really get his point across to his brother, he then goes back in time and corrupts a younger version of Thor to change the outcome of the present. With all those years of experience and practice, he has gained much more power, allowing him to successfully, and sometimes not so successfully, alter timelines to meet outcomes of his choosing, which makes him pretty influential in the grand scheme of things. This is a very powerful version of Loki with a ton of accolades under his belt and a lot of resentment. Also, his name just gives me bad vibes. Who let Loki be king of anything? Come on, haven't we learned? At number 4, we have Loki 16191, who is another female iteration of Loki, and in this world, she is a member of A-Force, an organization that defends Arcadia from any unwanted enemies or visitors. In this reality, Loki is a foster mother to America Chavez and Nico Minoru, and she seems to have a very close bond with the two of them. But when a megalodon appears in Arcadia through a mysterious portal, America throws it over the shield and is arrested by the Thors. I know, this one's a bit weird, isn't it? But what makes this Loki so powerful is that she basically runs the show in this reality, keeping a watchful eye over Arcadia. She also seems to have let go of the typical Loki motivations of power hunger and sibling rivalry for the most part, showing genuine love and care for her foster daughters. Fortunately, however, it's later uncovered that she hadn't really let go of that power hunger and had allowed the megalodon through the portal, causing her daughter's arrest. And after she lets in sentinels through another portal, She-Hulk confronts her big time and the battle is on. Loki unleashes her power and breaks down part of the shield, allowing zombies again to enter Arcadia. This Loki is one to watch out for, considering she is in a high position of power and isn't afraid to start zombie wars and break down whole systems of government for the simple cause of revenge. At number 3, there's classic Loki. This version of Loki appears in the Disney Plus Loki TV series, showing off supreme powers that could only prove why he was put away into the void in the first place. He is able to fool Thanos by creating a projection of himself, making Thanos think that he'd killed him, when in reality, he's posing as a little piece of debris nearby the ship as Thanos takes off. On top of that, he's able to create an illusion of Asgard to distract Alioth and allow Sylvie and time-traveling Loki to escape. The illusion is so impressive that neither Sylvie or even himself thought it possible. He's an older, wiser version of Loki that has clearly seen a lot and learned a lot from his experience. And if we're being honest, the original Loki's biggest weaknesses that keep him from reaching his full power are his insecurities. And with maturity, it seems that these concerns have drifted away for the most part, allowing him to focus and be that much more powerful. At number 2, we have Ecole, which is Loki spelled backwards. This alternate version of Loki is the elder essence of Loki that still remains in the mind of Kid Loki. Since Kid Loki has gone down a path of good, it becomes Ecole's duty to stop his progress and take back Kid Loki's body to be his own. This version of Loki, although only a mirage, is able to use his manipulation to stop his legacy of trickery and evil from being overwritten and reinstill his evil impact into the universe. What makes him so powerful and dangerous in the form of Ecole is that he is the pure concentrated essence of mischief and hate. He's what's left when you take the good that Loki has deep down and strip it out. And in a metaphorical sense, this means that Ecole exists in every form of Loki. He is what makes Loki cause so much death and destruction throughout all his alternate iterations. He is the constant, but what's good is that there are more spots left, and the next one is reserved for Kid Loki. Kid Loki comes in at number 1 because of this sheer influence on the outcome of so many events. And in this case, these are positive events with the intention of gaining Thor's respect and affection. Like when he hides the world's heart, diverting Galactus from consuming Asgard, saving Midgard from the War of the Serpent, and bringing Thor back from the dead, to name a few. He also most notably influences Nightmare to create a fear crown, which the Fear Lords then start an endless internal conflict over, fighting for eternity to get the crown for themselves. This saves countless innocent lives, but doesn't last long, and Kid Loki has to let Ecole wipe his mind to destroy the foundation of the Fear Crown, which was derived from one of Loki's fear clots. To add another accolade to Kid Loki's power, he allows this to happen because now the immortal demon Mephisto has acquired the crown. But before he goes out, he rubs it in Ecole's face that he won, that good won, and that Ecole wasn't strong enough to fight against the good that Kid Loki was destined to do. So there you have it, a super effective version of Loki who arguably had more of an impact in his short life than any other Loki has had ever, and all for the greater good. And that is pretty powerful. Into it. At number 10, we have Curse. This dude is known to be one of the physically strongest villains on the list in terms of brute force, and he shows that off a few times by beating Thor in hand-to-hand combat without really breaking a sweat. Although he appears in one of the worst Thor movies, I would say, Thor the Dark World, this villain is not to be written off so fast. This is one of those villains that isn't just defined by one character and comes back around with multiple different creatures taking up the mantle. But the original, Algren the Strong, has enough strength to take down the likes of Beta Ray Bill, Thor, and Loki. And even after this, the Beyonder decides to enhance Curse's abilities fourfold for some reason, as if he wasn't strong enough already. This forces Thor to put on his belt of power to take on the Dark Elf, something he seldom ever does. Although he does get the job done eventually, this guy really gives Thor a run for his money. At number 9, we have Hela, daughter of Loki and giantess Argerboda. Hela is feared to be a huge threat from the get-go by none other than the Allfather Odin. And if Odin is concerned about someone, you best believe they're gonna be a real powerhouse, especially with the anger and resentment that Hela carries with her to Hell when Odin banishes her there. It's hard to tell if this was a good or bad move by Odin to send her to Hell, because it definitely motivates her to come back and try and kill as many Asgardians as possible, which she does when she gets back. But I mean, what else was Odin gonna do? It's his granddaughter after all. She's able to time travel, kill immortals with bolts of energy, and she even somehow shows signs of being able to slow down Thor's hammer mid-motion and redirect it at him in battle. But the way she really shows her power is through her manipulation over life and death with her Death Touch ability. It's unclear if she was able to acquire these unholy powers from her time in Hell or if she was just born this way. But regardless, she's always been known as one of the toughest villains Thor will ever have to face. At number 8 is the Destroyer armor. This isn't really one particular villain, but a suit of armor that is so overpowered that whoever wears it would end up at number 8 on this list regardless. I really don't know what Odin was thinking when he created the Destroyer armor, because he decided to make it stronger than Mjolnir and capable of killing gods. And okay, fine, before you comment, that was just rhetorical. I do know what they were thinking. Odin creates the armor with Zeus in preparation for a potential battle with the 4th host of Celestials. So maybe I do sort of get it. But they make the armor so powerful that it becomes a weapon to be manipulated by Thor's adversaries on multiple occasions. Made out of an unknown metal known to be stronger than Uru, which is what Mjolnir is made out of, the armor is entirely invulnerable, physically speaking. But it seems relatively easy to take control of because Thor ends up facing off against it a number of times. It always tends to be a really dicey battle too, because Thor is a god, and as we know, this armor can kill gods. So yeah, I had to throw it on the list here. At number 7 is the Black Winter. This villain, it's hard to refer to a giant life-eating cosmic mass as a villain, but anyway, this thing, I'll say, is so powerful that it's only destroyed when Thor becomes herald to Galactus and they team up to take it down. The Black Winter is the being that destroys Thor's home galaxy, and it comes back to take him out for good, which naturally motivates Thor more than almost any other battle we've seen him in. Luckily, he has Galactus on his side, because otherwise this might have just been an opportunity for the Black Winter to simply finish the job he started years ago. Thor does take down the mass, but also turns on Galactus, making it a 2-for-1 takedown in the end. This is actually a smart move. You can't trust Galactus for too long. He's too hungry for worlds, I think. At number 6 are the Frost Giants. This entry deals with not only one villain, but a whole army of them that seem to always be biting at Thor's heels. Although these guys are almost always taken down by Thor as a result of every encounter, they are pretty relentless and extremely powerful, all things considered. Led by Loki, king of the Frost Giants, this horde is able to control the environment, most notably any settings that feature ice and snow, but the most powerful out of this immeasurable force is Ymir, an ancestor of the Frost Giants and powerful elemental who basically can freeze anything he touches. He's the worst of the Frost Giants and is so overpowered that he's more of an entity than a beast. In fact, Thor is known to have trouble taking him down, leaving the job to Odin most of the time. At number 5 we have Surtur, the king of the fire giants. An immortal being, Surtur is basically incapable of being killed for good, so he definitely ranks high on the list, even if that were all he had going for him. But that sure isn't it. This monstrosity has shown stronger power levels than even Celestials, most notably when he's hit with Thor's God Blast and doesn't even flinch. This attack is known to be Thor's strongest by far, and in the past it's even warded off Celestials, so that's a huge accolade. And on top of all that, in this same encounter, Surtur even kills Allfather Odin, which is naturally a pretty unprecedented feat. Surtur is also known to be a good strategist, strangely, and wields the Sword of Doom, which is capable of destroying whole dimensions on its own. So naturally he is not to be messed with, and with his immortality in consideration, it's pretty well confirmed that Thor and his allies are never truly gonna take this guy down for good. At 4 is the Midgard Serpent, or Jormungand. During Ragnarok, a prophecy foretells that the serpent and Thor will one day kill each other in combat. So this bad guy is undoubtedly known as one of Thor's toughest opponents, hands down. He's a constant threat to Asgard, and much like Surtur, is known to be immortal, so there's really no ending this guy once and for all. He's more commonly cast away as a prisoner, which is commonplace for any villain that shows signs of immortality, but when he's on the move, he's known to be one of the most powerful and threatening forces Thor ever faces off against. He's capable of causing earthquakes effortlessly, and has the ability to create illusions on command to confuse the Asgardians. His poison is also known to take down gods, so Thor is always on the move to avoid battle with this villain, whatever the cost. At number 3 is Mangog. Aside from his sheer power, this villain has one of the most epic backstories that sort of makes you think that the Asgardians made their own bed with this guy. Figuratively speaking. You'll get what I mean in a sec. Mangog is pretty much a representation of a whole race of people that Odin wiped out years ago. So this beast is able to harness the vengeance of billions of people and concentrate it all into his lust for destruction and revenge on the Asgardians. He even survives a supercharged attack by Thor at one point that is set off when he sticks Mjolnir down the beast's throat during battle. Mangog's accolades are defeating Odin, Thor, as well as even the Destroyer armor, which we already explored, as being one of the most powerful forces in existence. Although this beast is basically a personification of Odin's past mistakes, we still hope that one day they can make amends with Mangog once and for all, as unrealistic as that might be. At number 2 is the one and only Gorr the God Butcher. This formerly harmless looking alien is originally from a people that believe deeply in the spiritual, and more specifically in the existence of gods. But when Gorr's whole family dies off one by one, he is completely grief-stricken and left denying the existence of gods altogether. After he's forced out of society by his people because of this newfound belief, or disbelief rather, he goes on to find out that gods do in fact exist, which angers him considering they had done nothing to help him and his family. This all leads him to coming into ownership over All Black, a symbiotic sword that has the power to kill gods on contact. And paired with his undying resentment towards the gods, Gorr and his new god-killing sword make for one of the most intimidating and motivated villains to any and all gods who know of his existence. Although he may not be the most powerful by metrics, I put him high on the list because his horrific backstory informs an unmatched drive to kill Thor. And I wanted to honor the hype that he rightfully deserves as his appearance nears closer in the new Thor movie. And finally at number 1 we have to put Galactus, because there's really no other being more powerful than Galactus, and he has been a villain to Thor time and time again. First introduced in Fantastic Four number 46, Galactus, aka the Devourer of Worlds, is simply on another scale of destruction than anyone else on this list. Another immortal being, it's impossible to take this guy down for good, but even getting the chance to banish him comes at such a price that he's almost not worth fighting a lot of the time. Hence why Thor actually teams up with him, as mentioned earlier on the list. He's equipped with abilities beyond force and into the realm of reality warping, being able to change the outcome of certain realities on command, and of course, destroying whole planets at will. Although Thor does gather enough power down the line to defeat Galactus, it takes years of refining his abilities to do so.
Number 10. Donald Blake. Donald Blake may be one of the characters fans of Thor in the comic are most familiar with of those on our list. He has made more appearances than others for sure, but he is better known in the comics as a version of Thor and later as his ally as opposed to his enemy. Donald Blake sort of used to be Thor, but then he became his own separate entity, but then he still helped Thor. However, in recent years, Donald Blake has become the enemy of Thor after he was locked away in a fantasy realm. Having learned the truth of his false existence there, he called to Thor for help, but when Thor never answered, Blake began to unravel, believing that Thor had abandoned him. He started to strike out first at those who he could, the fake beings living inside the dream reality with him. But once free from reality and back in the real world, Blake came after as many Thors as he possibly could as he sought revenge. Blake vowed to destroy all who did or had carried the mantle of Thor. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and you love obscure Thor villains, be sure to let us know by clicking that like button on this video. Thumbs up. Number 9. King Laufey. Laufey is known for being the leader of the Giants of Jotunheim. In fact, he is technically Loki's biological father, with his wife Farbauti being Loki's birth mother. Laufey hasn't made too many appearances, and this could be because although he is a giant and you'd think he would be a massive threat as the king of all the Giants of Jotunheim, he actually doesn't seem to be that tough. Multiple times Laufey has been defeated and killed, and multiple times he's returned only to be defeated again. Thor has even prevented Laufey from being resurrected in the past as well. So while he is a fearsome foe to behold with a lot of sway and loyal followers, he probably hasn't made too many appearances because, well, half the time he's usually busy being dead. In fact, I'd say more than half the time he's pretty dead. Number 8. Serpent. Kull Borson is likely a villain who would be less well known by classic comics fans who have since fallen off reading, or just anyone who might not be as up to date on their modern comics or, only started reading modern comics in recent years. Kull Borson made his first appearance in part of the Fear Itself event, appearing in issue number 1. He was introduced as the God of Fear, Odin's brother, who was the rightful ruler of the 9 realms, at least initially, the All-Father prior to Odin. However, due to the fact that he did not keep his word when it came to listening to his brother's counsel once he became All-Father, and also chose to rule with fear, he ended up being usurped. Odin could not bring himself to kill his brother and so decided to seal him away deep beneath the ocean. Typical Odin move in my opinion. The reason we never saw Kull until 2011 in the comics was because of his origins, with him being imprisoned for eons. He only emerged during Fear Itself, but was of course defeated and later was killed again during War of the Realms. He's definitely spent more time dead than alive in regards to Thor's overall narrative in the comics. Number 7. All Black. While Gorr is likely well known now thanks to his appearance in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU, the All Black has yet to be introduced to us yet. Nor its creator, Null. These two characters might be more elusive to fans who have not dived deep into the well of comics. The All Black is basically like Venom, a symbiote, and in fact the first symbiote ever created by Null, the god of symbiotes. The All Black Necrosword ended up being retrieved a long time ago by Gorr the God Butcher. Well, Gorr and then he became the God Butcher, who used the All Black as an instrument of vengeance, possibly even becoming corrupted by its dark influence somewhat, because that's kind of a thing it does. He used the sword to defeat the gods in an effort to rid the universe of gods entirely, which is how the All Black became the enemy of Thor. Eventually, the All Black bonded fully with Gorr, allowing him to resurrect even after he was killed. Both the All Black and Gorr would be defeated by a team of Thors, but the symbiotic sword would later return in the future when King Thor was also faced with fighting Galactus. Thor Thor would actually use the All Black in the fight, joining with it, and it would use him to get to Galactus, who the All Black would later bond with, turning Galactus from the Devourer of Worlds into the Butcher of Worlds. Number 6. Curse. Curse is Algrim the Strong. He was one of the Dark Elves who served Malekith, but was later betrayed by him. Due to the extent of his injuries, however, Curse cannot quite remember exactly what had really happened to leave him in such a fatal state, leaving him to believe that Thor was fully to blame, with Thor being the only person who he could remember was really involved at all. Curse's hatred for Thor was so powerful that the Beyonder sensed it and paid Curse a visit, deciding to grant him immense strength in addition to healing him. As such, Algrim became even stronger than ever and adopted the mantle of Curse, setting out to hunt down Thor. However, Curse would later remember the truth of Malekith's involvement in his initial demise and would later turn on him instead. Because yeah, Malekith kinda messed him up there. Number 5. The Midgard Serpent. While Jormungand is known for being an iconic Thor villain in terms of mythos, the serpent does not appear that much. In fact, Kolborsson's serpent, Thor's uncle, is probably more well known as a villain, and even he only really showed up a few years ago in the comics, first appearing just over a decade ago in 2011 in Fear itself. Oddly enough, although not his uncle, Jormungand is another serpent who also happens to be related to Thor as well, being rumored to be his nephew, the son of Loki and Angrboda, both frost giants. Because Jormungand was believed to be a future threat to the gods of Asgard, he was banished, sent to the depths of the ocean on Earth, becoming known as the Midgard Serpent, with Midgard being the name that Asgard uses for the realm of Earth. And you know, that's apparently where serpents go. Number 4. Curse. There is not only one curse, but actually two in the comics. For a time, Lady Waziria took over as the new curse. Initially, she was a dark elf who, after being betrayed by Malekith herself, became his enemy, seeking revenge against him. As such, she joined up with the League of Realms, heroes from the 9 realms who had banded together to hunt down and apprehend Malekith. There's the 10 realms now, but it might have been the 9 realms only at that time. Later, Malekith would actually capture Waziria and force her to become the new curse, taking Algrim's place. However, she was only cursed for a few years, from 2017 to 2019 in the comics, so some might not remember this, and considering how Curse is pretty much fully covered, some may have not even known that this version of the villain was Lady Waziria herself, because you know, we don't really see much of her face or anything. Number 3. Those who sit above in shadow. To really understand the cycle of death and rebirth and why it happens is to know those who sit above in shadow. At least the cycle of death and rebirth as it applies to the Asgardians and the Norse gods. And also you have to be pretty deep in the Thor mythos to know of those controlling villains. They are beings who apparently orchestrate the death and rebirth of the gods, feeding off the energy of mass destruction and world-devastating events like Ragnarok. Thor himself was actually a part of Odin's plan to defeat those who sit above in shadow, which was shown to have succeeded, but then later was revealed to have not completely worked. Or to have completely worked, but then those who sit above in shadow, I guess, simply returned afterwards. You know how it is. Number 2. Sindring the Merciless. Sindring the Merciless only made a few appearances in the comics. Less than a handful, I believe. Sindring was initially one of the members of All-Father Odin's council. However, after Odin learned that Thor had revealed his true identity to Jane Foster, he decided to take away Thor's power as a punishment. Y'all know Odin, for years, was not a fan of Jane Foster. He definitely did not ship Thor and Jane together. But Odin could not bring himself to take Thor's power, and so had Sindring do it for him. However, Sindring became ambitious as a result of the newfound power coursing through his veins. Rather than pass it on to Odin, as he was, you know, supposed to do, he instead became an adversary of both Odin and Thor by attempting to usurp Odin, take over Asgard, and become the new Allfather instead. Number 1. Replicas. Replicas only appeared in one single issue, both making their debut in issue 141 of Thor, but also seeing their demise in the very same issue. I love a one-shot villain. Although I would say Replicas represented the real danger in this issue, Replicas was not alone when it came to their villainy. In fact, Replicas, also known as Replica Model X3, was actually an android created by the alien inventor Chutta. Chutta's secret mission was to prepare Earth for an invasion, and they created Replicas in the hopes of creating chaos on the planet's surface. The mob boss, Slugger Sykes, what a name, hoped to use replicas, going into business with Chutta in the hopes of acquiring his own personal army of androids. However, when Slugger learned of Chutta's true intent, it put the two villains behind replicas at odds with one another, and instead they kind of turned on each other. You know, Slugger lives on Earth, so he was like, I'm an Earth person and I think you wanting to mess us up, not so cool, Chutta, even for me, a mob boss. Number 10, first appearance. While Gorr the God Butcher is mentioned in Thor God of Thunder issue number 1, the character actually makes their first appearance in the following issue, issue number 2. Gorr was created by Asad Rabish and Jason Aaron, and is introduced to us as a literal butcher and destroyer of gods. Really, in issue 1 we are introduced to Gorr by not just name, but by his handiwork, as Thor comes across dead gods of a world that claims they no longer have any to answer their prayers. It turns out that this is not because the gods have forsaken them, but because their gods are literally dead, killed by Gorr. In issue number 2, we see Gorr pursue Thor, hoping to find other gods and following him. The two face off in the clouds, having a bloody fight where Gorr promises to butcher Thor, as he has done to many gods before. Fortunately, he does not succeed, and Thor manages to escape, despite being pretty badly beaten by Gorr. However, this issue would set the precedent for the kind of fights you expect to see Gorr get into. If y'all thought Hela was bad, just wait till you meet Gorr. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists centered around Love and Thunder, which I'm sure is going to have lots of cool stuff in it, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9, Forsaken. Speaking of potentially being forsaken by your gods, that is exactly what happened to Gorr and his people, which was why he became a god butcher in the first place. After losing his entire family due to natural disasters and starvation, Gorr rebuked the gods, deciding he did not believe in them. As a result, he was ostracized from his people for his lack of belief. It was then that he stumbled upon two gods in a battle between one another and learned that they did actually exist. They simply didn't seem to care. Furious at this revelation, Gorr ended up killing both gods, or at least that's what it seemed like, and then began to wonder if there were any others out in the cosmos, deciding he would look and see and kill all gods that he found in revenge for all he had lost due to their inaction. Number 8, the all-black Necro Sword. How does Gorr manage to defeat so many gods? Well, this is largely thanks to his bond with the all-black, or the Necro Sword, or the all-black Necro Sword, or the God Slayer. It's got a lot of names. This weapon is actually the first symbiote as well. It is all-powerful and lends to Gorr the strength he needs in order to face off with and defeat the gods. And what's more, Gorr doesn't just use the all-black as a weapon, but he also bonds with it, becoming one with the symbiote and essentially through it gaining a sense of immortality. For as long as a small piece of the all-black remains, Gorr's consciousness too kind of lives on within it, meaning that from the all-black he can live on and essentially reform in a way. Number 7, Null the King in Black, and also known as the God of Symbiotes. Gorr and Null kind of have a history, albeit a quite brief history. In case you were wondering where the all-black came from as a symbiote, it did come from Null himself. Null had set out on a mission to destroy all those that represented light in the universe, seeking to destroy in essence all of the good gods. He created his firstborn, the all-black, which was a powerful weapon that he used in battle to carry out his mission. However, he ended up falling during this time. As Null lay temporarily defeated, Gorr came upon him and took the all-black for himself. The golden god that Null fought begged Gorr for help, which Gorr ignored as he felt he'd been ignored, instead choosing to kill the god in response. He probably thought the dark god Null was also dead as well, but of course we know that Null didn't die there and instead lived on for a long time thereafter. Number 6, an ancient evil. Not only does Gorr have the all-black, which is considered to be an ancient embodiment of evil itself, but he too is also an ancient villain. Gorr might be newer when it comes to Marvel Comics history, but within the lore of the world, he has been alive for thousands of years and spent millennia hunting down and murdering gods, which means at this point he's pretty much an expert when it comes to his capabilities and his skill set. That will also likely be Gorr's story previous to when we meet him in the MCU, meaning he'll be a devastating foe for both Thor Odinson and Jane Foster's mighty Thor to go up against. Number 5, a familiar foe. It should also be noted that because Gorr the God Butcher has been around for so long, he isn't just some random villain that Thor comes across. comics. Despite him not making his first comic book appearance until 2012, he and Thor go way back when it comes to their history with one another. In fact, when Thor first comes across the dead gods in issue number 1 of Thor God of Thunder, he doesn't ponder on who is behind it. He actually recognizes Gorr's handiwork and suspects him first and foremost. So despite the fact that he didn't exist in comics until 2012, when it comes to his backstory, the God of Thunder and Gorr still have had a history. In fact, historically, the first version of Thor that Gorr was familiar with was one from way back around 800 AD, a much younger Thor than the present day version that we're familiar with in the main continuity currently. Hence why we follow this version of Thor along with a present and a future version of the character, with their stories interwoven between each other in the Thor God of Thunder series, because, you know, we gotta explain the story of Gorr. Despite the year of release being 2012 onward, Gorr was also being retconned into Thor's history in this narrative. So it is possible in the film Love and Thunder, Thor will also be familiar with Gorr, and the two may already have had a history in the MCU that simply hasn't been touched on yet. Number 4, the Butcher in God Butcher. While there are times that you might feel sympathetic towards Gorr, especially considering his tragic origins, and at times his desire to kind of bring people together by killing gods and dismantling beliefs that may otherwise separate them, he is still very much a dark and murderous figure. He doesn't just kill gods, he straight up does butcher them, hence his title. He earned that title. For Gorr, he doesn't just want the gods gone, he wants them to feel pain similar to what he himself suffered, and he genuinely seems to enjoy tormenting and toying with gods because of this. You won't just see him make quick work of many gods he comes across, and if he does happen to make quick work of an enemy, it's still likely going to be brutal and bloody, which is what Gorr is pretty much known for in the comics. Number 3, cruelty. The other crazy thing about Gorr is just how cruel he can be. You would think after all he's lived through, he might be inclined to, you know, show like a modicum of mercy to those he has captured and not yet killed. After all, that's likely what a younger Gorr would have hoped for, mercy and kindness from his own gods. And yet Gorr was made hard instead by his experience, turning him somewhat into a hypocrite. Despite the fact that he cursed the injustice and cruelty of his gods, this is what he gives back to all those he comes across that oppose him, blinded by his pain and his rage. When Gorr captures Volstagg and makes him work for hundreds of years in his mines without feeding him anything, Gorr whips the god after he stole a loaf of bread. Volstagg reveals that he was starving, admitting that after hundreds of years, even a god needs to eat some amount of food and must give in to hunger. But Gorr only sees this as theft and greed. That is how blinded by rage he has become at this point, and that is how heartless Gorr is. He has no sympathy for any god, and like no matter the circumstance. He's like, are you a god? I don't care. I'm gonna treat you terribly. That's it. And then you're gonna die brutally. Number 2, Gorr the God. Speaking of the cruelty that Gorr showed Volstagg, his mistreatment of the Asgardian only got worse once Volstagg pointed out that even if Gorr managed to wipe out all of the gods, as impossible as that would be, he would never truly finish his mission. Why? Because Gorr himself had become an immortal god. He raised worlds, killed and did as he pleased, made others serve him, and in a way, kind of made others worship him. He was indestructible, undefeatable, and inevitable, all adjectives that you associate with godlike beings. According to Volstagg, Gorr had become the very thing that he claimed he hated. Needless to say, this was not a reflection that Gorr chose to subscribe to, and he was not very pleased that Volstagg had implied this about him. Still, I think Volstagg definitely was making sense with this observation, which is probably why it made Gorr so angry, because deep down, he knew that it was at least partially true. Number 1, Agar. Agar was the last member of Gorr's family to die before he found the Necro Sword and became a killer of gods. After the death of his mother when he was only a child, the death of his pregnant wife later in life, and all of their other children, his son Agar was the only one left. When Agar died of starvation, that was the final straw for Gorr, who lost all faith in the gods completely, as a result of his guilt, his pain, and his inability to accept the loss of Agar. Gorr created an alternate version of his son, instinctively using the All Black to do so. This construct, it turns out, also represented the hatred that Gorr felt towards what he had become. Yeah, he pretty much knew he'd become a god. He was just in denial. Ultimately, this construct of Agar therefore teamed up with Thor to help him in defeating his father, Gorr, in the end revealing that he was truly no more than the symbiotic weapon that Gorr had carried with him for years as Agar faded away.
Coming in at number 10, we've got the time that Thor was left for dead adrift in space as seen in the MCU film Avengers Infinity War. Thor has a pretty brutal time during the two most recent Avengers movies, with Infinity War beginning with Thor having to watch both Loki and Heimdall die, and the Hulk be defeated by an intimidating new villain, Thanos. After this smackdown, Thor is left adrift in space with the remnants of the Asgardian refugee ship, something that would likely kill any human hero in the Marvel Universe, and yet Thor is able to survive until he conveniently bumps into the windshield of the Guardians of the Galaxy, showing that, I guess Asgardians are just really good at holding their breath. Coming in at number 9, we have the time Malekith turned Thor's liver into broken glass, a magical punishment that makes me wince just thinking about it. Malekith might get a bad rap for his lackluster portrayal in the film Thor: The Dark World, but in the comics he's been a pain in Thor's side for generations, and in this case, I mean that pretty literally. During an event that saw multiple Thors from different points of his timeline fighting against the Dark Elves, Malekith used his magic to torture a young Thor, and claimed to have turned his liver into a mound of broken glass within his own body. Understandably, this upset Thor, and his response was to spit shards of glass into Malekith's face, which is probably the most badass way possible to respond to some heavy internal bleeding. Coming in at number 8, we have all the times that Thor has wrestled with the Hulk. Whether it's in comic books, animated television shows, or billion-dollar blockbusters, Thor has always been one of the few heroes capable of standing up to the strength of the Incredible Hulk. And this usually puts him into an awkward position whenever the Jade Giant inevitably goes on a rampage. Whether battling on the streets of Earth or the gladiator arenas of the planet Sakaar, Hulk and Thor will likely continue to test their strength against one another for many years to come, if only because Thor is one of the few people that can tank a green punch and keep on swinging. Coming in at number 7, we have the time Thor chose to tear out both of his eyes in pursuit of knowledge. Desperate for a way to prevent the destruction that would be caused by the Asgardian event of Ragnarok, Thor visited the Well of Mimir, where Odin had once given up his eye in exchange for forbidden knowledge. However, Thor was stunned after removing his eye to find that the well still would not fill with water for him, only to slowly realize that since his father had already sacrificed an eye, he would need to up the sacrifice in order to be granted knowledge. Thus, Thor did the extremely metal act of ripping out both of his eyeballs, and despite his now literal blindness, was able to see the proper path forward to save the entire Marvel Universe. Coming in at number 6, we have the multiple occasions that Thor has survived the power of the sun. As an Asgardian that's thousands of years old, Thor's adventures have spanned all across the cosmos, and have led to Thor being put in the most destructive situations possible more often than you'd think. While aiding Adam Warlock in the Infinity Watch, Thor found himself having to withstand the strength of a star going supernova, an explosion that left him dazed and confused in an unknown location, but still undeniably alive and uninjured. Combined with the times that Thor has shrugged off attacks that have claimed to be as powerful as multiple exploding suns, and the God of Thunder really has an impressive survival resume. Coming in at number 5, we have the Norse event of Ragnarok. An ancient prophecy spelling both doom and rebirth for every living being in Asgard, the concept of Ragnarok has been used for multiple events throughout Thor's lifetime, and even adapted into one of the best MCU films. In the comics, however, Thor spent many years attempting to prevent Ragnarok, and when Asgard was finally fated to be destroyed, Thor defied the gods who had created the Asgardians and destroyed the World Tree, ending the constant cycle of Ragnarok and relocating Asgard to float directly above the state of Oklahoma. Definitely an odd way to end a story about the end of the universe, but hey, at least Thor's still alive. Coming in at number 4, we have the time Thor was destroyed by, who else? The Destroyer. During the big relaunch of Thor's self-titled series during the late 90s, Thor once again had to face off against one of his earliest foes, the Destroyer, as it relentlessly attacked the rest of the Avengers. In a stunning twist for a first issue of a new series, Thor was actually killed by this version of the Destroyer and sent to the realm of Hell, where Thor had to bargain and fight his way out of his imprisonment to return to Earth and save the rest of the Avengers. Does it still count as survival if you actually did die, you just don't stay in the afterlife though? Who knows at this point in the Marvel Universe. Coming in at number 3, we have the time Thor was turned to glass and then shattered by Thanos. In the MCU films, Thor and Thanos built up quite the intense and personal rivalry over just a couple films, but their confrontation in the comics version of the Infinity Gauntlet storyline somehow managed to knock the God of Thunder even lower. Thanos' reality-warping powers were put to use during his final battle, and just when Thor seemed ready to bring his hammer down on Thanos' head, the God of Thunder was turned to glass and then shattered, a humiliating defeat against a villain who, at this point, had complete control of the laws of the universe. Better luck next team-up event, Thor. Coming in at number 2, we have Thor surviving 3 direct attacks from the celestial Arishem. If you've seen Marvel's Eternals in the past year, you know just how huge Arishem is, and with Celestials being some of the most powerful beings throughout the entire Marvel Universe, they are not creatures you want to mess with. However, after believing Arishem had killed his father Odin, Thor relentlessly attacked the Celestial with his hammer, refusing to back down even as Arishem brought his full strength down on him, finally claiming defeat by throwing the Celestial's own magical sword through his chest, even if by the end of this fight, Thor looked like his entire costume had been put through a shredder. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the time Thor survived the torture of the God Butcher for over 2 weeks. Gorr the God Butcher has been one of Thor's biggest foes for the last decade of comics, and this year we'll finally get to see the villain on screen portrayed by Christian Bale in the MCU film Thor: Love and Thunder. In the comics, Gorr is attempting to murder every deity across the Marvel Universe, and after capturing a young Thor, boasts that even gods of torture can only last moments under his interrogation techniques. Amazingly, Thor held out against Gorr's torture for 17 days, before finally being able to free himself due to the arrival of his Viking allies. This scenario would scar Thor physically and mentally for many ages to come, but being able to survive the God Butcher for such a long time is something Thor should be truly proud of.